All right, Thrive Nation, on today's show, we are interviewing Sarah Westall. She's a computer science networking expert about the truth related to the attempt to steal the U.S. election. We're talking about the truth related to the stealing of the ballots. She's also going to share with us about the attempted coup to steal the White House from America. And she's going to talk to us about the Great Reset. But, Andrew, we have very encouraging news for the listeners out there.
Yes, we do.
President Trump signed an executive order, and when you guys hear about what happens to the people who are found and to be found guilty of trying to people who are involved in trying to steal or rig this election, you're going to be very excited. If you're a freedom lover and you want President Donald J. Trump to win again, you're going to love today's show. So it's going to start off with some heavy stuff, but it's going to end with some positivity.
That's right.
All this and more on today's edition of the Thrive Time Show on your radio and podcast download.
Get ready to enter the Thrive Time Show.
We started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, now we here.
We started from the bottom, now we're on the top, teaching you the systems to get what we got. Colton Dixon's on the hooks, I break down the books. Z's bringing some wisdom and the good looks. As the father of five, that's why I'm a dive. So if you see my wife and kids, please tell them hi. It's the CNC up on your radio, and now 3, 2, 1, here we go.
We started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom and
Yes, 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 and yes. Thrive Nation, it is a very special occasion because it is always profound when we are above the ground, but many of you are not aware of the number one biggest limiting factor and threat for your family right now. Many of you have no idea, have zero concept about what I'm talking about today, and it's not because you're stupid. It's because the truth has been hidden from you. So many of you are saying, well, why are we doing lockdowns? Why are we doing mask mandates? Why? It's not about a virus. It's not about Antifa. These are all features. These are all sub-ideas underneath the big idea, which is called the Great Reset. And so many of you listeners are what I would call active people who engage. You don't just listen to the show passively. You email in to info@thrivetimeshow.com and you say, Mr. Clay Clark, will you interview Sarah Westall, because she probably is smarter than you, and we need to have smart people on the show to balance out your lack of intelligence or whatever. And so we reach out to smart people. We have Ben Carson on the show. We have Wolfgang Puck on the show. We have Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari. And so now without any further ado, Sarah Westall, welcome on to the Thrive Time Show. How are you?
Well, thank you. I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me.
What state do you call home?
I am in Minnesota.
Oh, don't you know?
Yeah, I got to experience the great Minneapolis meltdown.
You know, I grew up in west of Minneapolis in a town called Cokato, Minnesota, small farm town out there. And to see what was happening in Minnesota was just heart-wrenching. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to go through 4 big ideas with you. And I know you can go down deep, but before we get into these issues, where can people learn more about you? Like, what's the website where people can Google search and verify that you are, in fact, not a psychologically impaired person? Because you, in fact, are very sane.
You can go to sarahwestall.com. I have articles and shows and all sorts of things on there. You will learn a lot about the condition of the world, what's going on. And I work really hard to bring the best people I can to help educate myself and everyone else on what's truly happening.
What was your background before discovering that the global reset was a real thing? Like, what did you do for a career?
Well, my background is computer science and engineering and business. And I actually was started in the computer industry at US West Networking, and I rose up to that, and I was responsible for all the networking division. And then I left, started my own business, and I started a multi-million-dollar business, ended up having some issues with the bank that ended up going down for fraud. And, in the 2008, it was a very interesting time. I taught at the Carlson Business School for 5 years, and I started this radio show, kind of like you did, where I was talking about the edge of business, how the world's changing. And then I started learning, well, why is this great invention not being used that can forward mankind? And why is this not happening? And I started learning why things were being oppressed and why things were happening and why. And once you start going down some rabbit holes, you can't unlearn what you've learned. And I'm seeing that there's kind of a repetitive thing with what you are dealing with here with your show, where the lockdowns, or why would they possibly shut down the entire economy over a virus that isn't worse than the flu for the majority of the people? And you started learning that, and then you realize, okay, there's bigger agendas here. And why, if the elderly are the most vulnerable, why aren't we protecting them? And why are we sending our sick there while we're locking everybody else down? And in the meantime, why are 10 times more people dying from the mandates than from the virus itself? But they're still doing these dumb mandates. What's going on? The world is in Twilight Zone. And so you're trying to figure this all out.
So let's make sure.
That happened to me, but differently.
Let's make sure the listeners get this for a second. We initially shut down our country because the Abdul Latif Jameel Institute predicted that 2.2 million people might die from the coronavirus. And the Abdul Latif Jameel Institute, by the way, is funded by Amazon. Don't believe me? Look that up. Go to timetofreeamerica.com. The models, Aaron, you remember the models. They said 2.2 million people might die. People are running around thinking the virus might be spread. People are hiding from each other.
Yeah.
And it turned out Deborah Birx steps to the podium and says, well, perhaps you've heard the models were wrong by 25 times.
25 times.
But we were just shutting down for 2 weeks to pause to keep the hospitals from being overwhelmed.
Yep.
Now we know the virus, if you're under the age of 50, has a 99.98% survivability rate. We know if you take budesonide, a.k.a. budesonideworks.com, the FDA-approved asthma medication, if you take that, we've had 0 confirmed fatalities in the world that we know of from anybody who's taken budesonide. And Dr. Richard Bartlett, the former top advisor for the governor of Texas, Governor Perry, has personally treated over 1,000 people with budesonide with no deaths.
Yep.
Yet budesonide and hydroxychloroquine, the treatments are being banned. So the fear is being inflated.
Yep.
The treatments are being banned. And now we know the PCR tests, they work very well to test for COVID-19 if they're set at 17 cycles or 17 amplifications. And we know that they are calibrated to be wrong from the get-go.
Yep.
So these things are calibrated at 35 and 40 cycles. So when you take a PCR test, you're actually getting a false positive almost every single time.
Well, that works when you have a case-demic.
And then there's all these things happening. Let's get into the Great Reset. What is the Great Reset, Sarah? And because I know this, you know this, but break it down for the listeners out there. What is the Great Reset? And as the listeners are listening to you, I'm encouraging every listener, go to timetofreeamerica.com as you're listening and click on the button so you can see what Al Gore and the Prime Minister of Canada and the head of Australia has to say about the Great Reset. So what is the Great Reset, Sarah?
Oh, the Great Reset. You go to the Economic Forum and look at what they have on the Great Reset. It starts with COVID. I did a little documentary that is a lot of people have been watching, and I based it on Grace Van Berkham's research. She's just a great researcher. And then I went and I put the documentary together and did more research on top of it. But it all starts with COVID. And this was written, her research was written at the beginning of June. So they had all this stuff at least the end of May sitting there, starting with COVID. It's a big circle wheel, and it goes down like 200 levels of how they're going to change the entire society, starting with COVID as the catalyst. And I'm telling you, they have every detail planned. I don't know how they could have had that sitting there since May, when they didn't even know really about the virus till February. And I mean, this was in the works for a long time. And they are talking about not only redoing the economy, with a digital currency of some sort. They want to, I've done shows on this as well. And this comes from the central bankers that have had the annual meetings in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and this is all on record in their speeches and so forth. They want to go around governments and come up with budgets. They want to declare budgets. They want to do it all on a carbon-based system so that for people to even be able to get access to capital. They want to define how many calories you can eat, where you live. It's just every detail of your life they want to control, and they all package it in this pretty package that it's about reducing poverty, eliminating poverty, and getting rid of starvation and hunger and all these other things. But I am telling you, there's nothing about individual rights. There's nothing about you making any decisions. It's a top-down, authoritarian, controlled system based on technocracy or communism or whatever you want to, some ism you want to call it. But they got the control and you don't. And they're coming up with in fact, they don't want sovereign nations. They want to create the budgets. The central bankers want to create budgets for the countries. It's like a banker's dictatorship. And I am not kidding. It's in their speeches. It's not from me. It's
Correct.
Their own words.
And by the way, if anybody wants to see this, and you should see this, go to timetofreeamerica.com and click on the Global Reset button. And there you're going to find a link to Al Gore in the Wall Street Journal talking about the Global Reset. You will find Al Gore and the UN Secretary General calling for the Global Reset on Fox Business. You will see a link to Event 201. You will see the written out plan called the Rockefeller Plan. All of these things are happening, and the only person standing in the way of all of this is President Donald J. Trump.
Amen.
Now, I have read the Rockefeller Plan, and I've been aware of this thing since about 2011 because that's when the thing was written, and I don't tell people, Sarah. I don't previous to this, because if you tell somebody, like and think about this, in 2016, if Aaron and I are talking and he says, "How are you, man?" And I say, "I'm doing good. Have you seen the Rockefeller Plan?" The Rockefeller. I mean, people would go, "What?" And if you showed it to them, they'd think you're crazy. Now, I just started talking about this about 9 months ago. You remember this, Aaron?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, people are like, "Dude, you got to calm down." I'm going, "No, it's good. You watch. And people would go, people would say, "You're crazy." And then they would call me, "Dude, you're 100% correct."
That's right.
I had a radio listener call me today from the Pat Campbell show, called me and apologized and said, "What you said 6 months ago on the show all happened. I thought you were crazy and I would prove you were wrong, but it's happening. What's going to happen next?" And I said, "You want to know? Curfews, quarantine, strict curfews, quarantines.
Yep.
So all businesses will die, all businesses. And then you will get a universal allotment of income only if you do what they want you to do." And you might say, "Who's we?" Can you explain that, what they want you to do, Sarah? Who's they?
How deep do you want me to go? Because the conspiracy theory, it seems like
just go only
theory.
as deep as you can cite with facts. I know you can cite everything with facts, but just go take us to the deep end, but we just want to be anchored in something.
Well, okay, I understand. And I'm going to tell you, it's the central bankers. It's the people who are very wealthy behind them, the globalists, the people who have a lot of money, who are controlling the Fortune 500 companies, who control the media. It's a group of people that are at Davos, the yearly Davos meeting. They're going to have that meeting, the Global Economic Forum. They're going to be having that next meeting coming up here real soon in January. The people who are part of the central bankers meetings, these are the most powerful people in the world, and they are planning this. They've been planning it for a long time. I do a lot of research who's behind that and everything else, and it gets into some pretty deep stuff. But I got to tell you, this is very real. And people, I had the same reaction that you've had, and I can't tell you how many people are coming back to me and saying, "Oh my God, you're right. And I don't want to be right on some.
I don't want to be right. We don't want to be right. We hate being right.
Get off this ride.
I don't want to be right on some of the stuff that I'm talking about now. The thing is that they believe what they're doing. I don't know why. I mean, I think these people are nuts. I think these people are crazy. I think they're off the deep end. But they truly believe it, and they are very, very committed to making this happen. And we need to fight it. And like you said, Donald Trump's in the way of that. There's a lot of people fighting. There's a lot of patriots. But this election is extremely important because Biden and Kamala, they're 100% on board with it. It'll accelerate if they get in.
Now, let me explain this to the listeners out there, okay? President Trump spoke out openly against the Davos meeting, saying, "We're not going to do your plan. We're going to keep America first." That's what America first means. It means we're not going to be a part of this globalist agenda. We're not going to do it, okay? And meaning specifically, we put God first. We believe we get our rights from God, and the Constitution was created to uphold those rights, and government works for us. In their word, the globalist world is the government's control of you. You work for the government, and you're lucky if they give you anything. So that's how that works. So they realized they weren't going to win the election. They weren't going to win the election because there's not enough people out there that are psychologically impaired enough to say, we want lockdowns, we want poverty, there's not enough people out there. So what they did, and you can correct me, Sarah, if anything I'm saying is incorrect. I'm working closely right now with Roger Stone in conjunction with the Giuliani camp to research this. But step one, the Canadian-owned Dominion company makes the vote counting machines, and that were used in 28 states. Step two, the Dominion gets its software, the Dominion vote counting machines, they get their software from Smartmatic, which is a Delaware company financed and created by Venezuelans who are close to the communist Venezuelan Chavez and Maduro family. Step three, your votes are sent to Frankfurt, Germany, where they're stored on a server in Frankfurt, Germany. Step four, the votes actually then get counted in Barcelona, Spain, and the Smartmatic software gives people the ability to change votes. Am I getting something wrong there?
You're absolutely right. And the thing is that the voter transactional data, which is really, really good for us in this fight, this fraud fight, is the voter transactional data is telling us that they're switching, and they were switching in mass.
Yes.
Votes from Trump to Biden. And some of the smartest computer scientists, it's actually not rocket science. This isn't the hardest stuff to figure out. But we got smart engineers, computer scientists looking through this and figuring it out. They're creating reports and saying, this is what happened, and we can take this to court and we can prove it. It's like a bank ledger. This is 100% proof. You can't mess with us. You can't, gaslight us and tell us it's a signature or anything like that. This is hard fact. And you guys stole this election from us and they knew there was 3 Democratic senators and a congressman back in 2019 that wrote an open letter saying that these Dominion systems switch votes. This is not a safe system. So all this gaslighting and saying that there's no fraud, they knew this thing did this.
Even Elizabeth Warren signed the documents looking into the investigation, and she's an outspoken Democrat. Now, I want to ask you this, Sarah. Have you seen on the whitehouse.gov, the presidential actions, the executive order imposing certain sanctions against foreign interference against the United States elections? Have you seen that?
I haven't read through the details. I know it's there, and I know he did it. And
James, I just showed it to you.
Yeah, that's right. Very important.
This is very important. So I want everybody to know out there. Sarah, what was your religious background growing up? How were you raised?
I raised in I had acolyte every other weekend. My mother's a Eucharistic minister. My dad was part of the, he was a senior warden of the church. And so I was always involved with the church, if that's what you're wondering.
No, I'm just curious.
I didn't like it as a kid, but I go and I put my kids in a Christian school because I think it's good for them to have that background. But I just like the values of it. But why are you asking?
I'm asking you this because I want to give you some encouragement. I didn't book you on here to give you encouragement, but I kind of did. Sneaky. If you go to Time to Free America tonight, Sarah, timetofreeamerica.com, and you click on the Trump prophecies at the bottom right, there's a guy by the name of Kim Clement who I had no idea who he was. Aaron, you've seen this guy.
Yes.
I had no idea who he was. And this guy he said that President Trump would be president specifically in 2011 when Trump wasn't even talking about it. And everything he said, he's now dead, by the way. He's been dead for quite a while. The things that he said that were going to happen are all happening, and it's like happening in a way that is bizarre, like super accurate. And
by the way, he died on Trump's inauguration day.
This is true.
You know that?
Yeah, and he has said this election would be contested, and it will get its way up to the Supreme Court, and there'll be this time of shaking where everybody will see where the true corruption is. And if that turns out to be true, I'm excited about that.
Yeah. It's great.
It's great, but it's kind of like, sometimes it's like when someone gets arrested for doing a crime, if you know that person, it's jarring.
Yeah.
But when the heads of the organizations you've trusted are all being arrested, I don't even know how that feels. And I think that's what's going to happen right now. Sarah, could you see any scenario from based on your research where you could see, because I everything I'm hearing right now, and again, I'm very close to as many sources, I'm hearing that there's a great amount of evidence being gathered, and even though the mainstream media won't cover it, Trump's going to nail this thing. Are you hearing that, or you disagree? Do you agree? What are your thoughts?
I think that the evidence is so strong and so overwhelming that if we have a fair court system, that there's no way that Trump doesn't prevail, and that we don't. I would like to see the senators and Congress positions also be looked into, because that is easily provable as well. We do not want the whole Senate and Congress moving over as well based on a stolen election. So that should go down as well. But the Supreme Court should be trusted. I don't know, the system is hard. There's attorneys backing out because they're being threatened. If God is on our side, which God's always on, I think God's on our side, but if God has his way on this, Trump should prevail, because truth, we have to push forward the truth. Some people say if the truth comes forward, that will create a lot of chaos and a lot of violence. And I say, well, we don't have a choice. If you allow this much corruption to stand, where our country's gone anyways. We have to fix it.
I want to come against that statement, not against you, but the statement of if the truth comes to light, there's going to be so much violence. I want to come against that. I'm going to do this. I don't typically talk about advocating violence, but I think for right now I'm going to share this idea, and hopefully people understand what I'm saying. Hopefully people understand the intent of this. In that controversial book called the Bible, Aaron,
I've read it.
Matthew chapter 10, verse 34 says, "Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. For I have come to set at man a variance against his father, and daughter against her mother, and daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's foes shall be they of his own household. He that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." All I can say is every country that is free now, like you think about Israel or America previous to COVID, that were free countries, there was some violence that happened. Mm-hmm. Now, I think this is an information war. It's how with some outbursts of violence. I don't know if you agree with that, Sarah, in America at least. But I think it's going to have to get a little, I think there's going to be some people, not everybody, but about 3 or 4%, some percentage of the extreme left that's going to freak out. I don't think it's not possible for them to, I think it's impossible for them to not freak out, because they've lied and deceived so much. These homies are going to prison forever if there is justice. Did you think, Sarah, that's reasonable to predict that if justice is brought to light, that the people who have a chance to lose everything and are going to go to jail for life, they might freak out a little bit?
I think there's a lot beneath the surface of what these people are doing. And it's not just election fraud. It's Trump has cleaned up more trafficking rings than any president in U.S.
Sex
history.
trafficking rings, sex trafficking rings, yes.
Yep.
And I'm telling you, if an organ and all sorts of things, if industry is a multi-billion, almost trillion-dollar industry, there's very powerful people involved, and they don't like it. If they are turning CIA tools against that were made as a way to keep United States citizens safe, and they're turning it on the people themselves, and generals are privatizing it and then using it against the people, that these things, and they're afraid to be found out, they will fight and fight and fight to keep themselves from going to prison. And I think that's what we're seeing now. They played their cards. You can't have him winning double digits in all these states, and then they stop voting, and then we all wake up and magically at 4 a.m. everything switches. It was too obvious. It was obscenely obvious in front of the world or anybody that can critically think. And they played their cards too much. They showed their hand. And so now all of us are like, wait a minute, this is obvious. And so they are desperate, and they are scared, and they will do anything. But we can't let our guard down. Like I've said on other shows, when you are messing with people like this, you can't. It's like when you're playing sports and you think you're the stronger team and you're playing a weaker team, but you go in there with an attitude and you get beat anyways.
Yep.
You can't have your guard down, because these people do not fight fairly. And we just have to keep pushing.
I agree. Now, for our listeners out there that want to learn more about you, what's your website one more time?
It's sarahwestall.com. Sarah spelled with an H, and then Westall spelled west, the opposite of east, and all, the opposite of none. Westall.
Westall. Now, Aaron Antis and James, I want to give you an opportunity to ask a question. Aaron runs the largest home building company in Oklahoma. Turns out free Americans like to build houses. Turns out communists who have government-funded housing probably don't build a lot of houses because they don't have the money the freedom to do so. You love America. You love freedom.
Yes, sir.
What question would you have about the Great Reset and or voting fraud that you have for today's guest?
Well, my main question is, Sarah, everybody's sitting here looking at the, this information, and those of us who have looked at it and say, yeah, this is what's going on in our world. We kind of get into that mindset of, well, what can I do about it? Yeah, I believe all of this information, but I don't have, the influence that you have or whatever. What can those people do? What's an action step they can take? Because they love America. They want to do something for America. These are great patriots, and there's more and more people coming around to this every day, but they're going to sit there and go, what can I do in this situation? So what would you say to that person?
Well, I think that's a great question, and that's something that everybody needs to be, asking. And I just put a list together. I just wrote an article today, and I put it out there for people. And let me see, I'm going to pull it up because I made a list for people just this morning.
I love it. That's great.
Make sure. But the first thing is to make sure that you are, you're being active. You're voicing what you see. You're voicing that you're not okay with this. You can attend rallies. You can do whatever it takes to make sure that people know that you're not okay with this level of fraud and that it exists. But here's some other things. Stop supporting mainstream media with your time because they're not telling you the truth.
That's a great action
Instead,
step.
support independent journalists that have proven to be trustworthy, because not all of them are trustworthy, and there's a lot of disinformation out there as well. But the ones who have proven to be trustworthy, those are who you follow. OAN, they're doing great coverage of election fraud. Watch them, support them. Be on the constant lookout for fraud, deception, and lies, and make sure that you're not supporting that. Reject the mainstream narrative overall, and make sure that you support initiatives to end abuse and corruption wherever you see it, at the local level, wherever you see it. So this is not okay. And have the confidence, have the courage. Courage is where there's fear. Courage is a different word. It means that what can happen to you at times, but you need to have the courage to end it, because if we don't end it with ourselves, it's not going to end. Don't be afraid to question authority. Make sure know that those people in authority, they work for you.
True.
Those people in office, they work for you. And then the last thing that I said today in my article is be a critical thinker. Devote time to learning new ideas. Never stop learning and never stop questioning. That's an important way of just being.
That's great.
I have we have time for one more question from James, the attorney. But before we do, I just want to get your take. I think I know you're going to answer this, but I just want to just ask the question. Charles Lieber was the Harvard scientist that was working on this nanotechnology. If everybody just does a Google search or a DuckDuckGo search, type in Charles Lieber, Harvard, DOJ indictment. Charles Lieber, DOJ, Harvard indictment. Charles Lieber was working on some technology. He failed to disclose that he was working for the Chinese for $50,000 a month to work on this nanotechnology.
Oh, he just forgot to tell people.
He forgot. The nanotechnology was then purchased by Bill and Melinda Gates, and the patent was filed this year, and the patent number is W0200606. The number is 060606.
That sounds like 666.
Jeffrey Epstein, if you type into DuckDuckGo, it says, or Google, Jeffrey Epstein, type it into Google. Jeffrey Epstein sought to create own race of people. Type it in. Jeffrey Epstein creates own race of people. Jeffrey Epstein, most prolific pedophile in world history that we know of. Jeffrey Epstein Bill Gates working very closely together using the technology from Lieber. They call this technology the luciferase. Luciferase is the name of the technology. The patent number 060606 sounds like a familiar number.
I've heard that
I
somewhere.
don't
Maybe
know. Revelations?
Revelations?
Oh,
Maybe?
the Bible.
Yeah.
Bible. So, Sarah, should we, as citizens, take the RNA modifying luciferase 060606 vaccine created by Bill Gates in conjunction with Charles Lieber and Jeffrey Epstein?
I think it's a mistake. I don't think anybody should be taking this. I don't know what the heck it's about. I mean, the RNA vaccine has never been used on society before. I mean, what the hell are we doing?
Well, but we got to do it with
No.
Operation Warp Speed. If we've
No.
never used it before, it's like taking off a Band-Aid. If you just do it really
Okay,
fast.
I
it's
believe
not
our
as bad.
president loves our people so much. He wants to liberate us from these lockdowns. I know this. I know people close to the White House who tell me this. Yeah. I believe he has been deceived in thinking that this is the best option.
Right.
And so you know this, Aaron. I am relentlessly getting messages up there.
Yep.
But I just think it's a general life tip. Tip number one. If you're asked to inject something into your body, read the label. If it's called Lucifer Race, don't take it. And if the patent number is 060606,
Hang on, I'm
don't
writing
inject
that
it.
down. I'm writing these tips down. That's really good.
And
Corey.
don't hang out with Antifa. Okay, so James and stop, drop, and roll. These are all life tips. Write these down. Look both ways before crossing traffic. Don't take the 060606 RNA modifying vaccines. James, what question do you have here for today's incredible guest, Sarah Westall of sarahwestall.com?
Hi, Sarah. I was reading the New York Post. I don't remember when it was, and I saw a headline that said, one person dies in New York City every 17 minutes. That was the headline. Something like that with respect to this COVID-19 stuff. And I was like, well, this is all relative to, it's got to be relative to something. What are the normal numbers? And then I looked up on
Are you
the
critically
CDC.
thinking over there?
Yeah. I looked up on the CDC website the top 10 leading causes of death, and it turns out that something like 5,700 people die every day. That's one person every 6 seconds without having COVID.
Now, you're just talking about facts.
Oh, the facts, yeah. I mean, well.
So the question I have, though, before, I want to interrupt your question with a question,
Okay.
and then you can ask your question. Because,
Okay.
Sarah, how does a guy like James go about sharing facts? Because you've done it very well. How do you share facts with people in a way that influences their thoughts?
Well,
You're asking me. I do the best I can with sharing the facts in a way that's not cramming it down people's throats as much as I can in my shows, and asking questions and telling people to be, trying to get people to be critical thinkers and open-minded, but critically thinking. But when I do my own reporting, I stay with facts that I can prove 100%. I interview people and they can't prove everything. It's more their experience, because I interview people that have experiences. That's different. I tell people that's different. But, that's a good question, because I think there's a lot of people that we're going to enter a time here where cognitive dissonance is going to be very strong. Yep. And that's why I say stop watching the mass media. They're lying. There's a media narrative that they're pumping out. There's no fraud. There's no fraud in this election. Meanwhile, we're uncovering all this fraud. The COVID, the fear of COVID, all they're doing is cases, but they're talking about it left. And so all these people are scared. Those people, it's very difficult to reach. I've been working so hard to reach those people. There are a lot of people that are on the fence. And I think if you're just not too hard about it and you just share information, but I got to tell you, daily I get told that I'm a moron and all these things.
Well,
this came up this morning at the morning meeting, because I was expressing to Clay my frustration to reach those people. He said, James, just put one grain of sand on the side of the scale that we're on at a time. Let's just worry about doing that, and eventually the scale is going to tip. So that gave a little bit of comfort.
That's true.
That's
true.
Yeah, I think so. I think that the scale there's people left behind, though. So the little trails that you're laying are way more than they can handle right now. And I think the trauma is going to come a little quicker. I think there's certain people that just aren't going to accept it. And it is what it is. And we're to the point now where we don't have a choice. and certain people are going to be that just can't get their head wrapped around it. Now I don't know. It is what it is at some point.
I'm
I have
gonna
a question. Can
Yeah,
I
go
ask
for
a
it. Go
question?
for it. Yeah,
All
do
right.
it. Yeah.
But so on that note, though, the other thing is that if 8 or 10 months ago me would have talked to me now, and I think Clay was kind of getting at this point in another respect, I would have thought that I was crazy. So my question for you is, when did you realize? When was your big enlightening moment? You know, I mentioned to you when I was looking at the New York Post article that said one person in New York is dying every 17 minutes. I thought it was an exaggeration. I wanted to see the context. I wanted to understand the context. And it was around that time that I sort of had my sort of awakening moment. When was yours?
Oh, mine was each one with the COVID was early, last probably February, as soon as I started figuring it out. But I was freaked out. I was one of the ones freaked out because China shut down. But as far as awakening in general, it was probably about 4 years ago. I had an interview with a person whose dad was procuring kids for sex trafficking, and I was very traumatized by it. And I'm pretty healthy, and I got sick because it traumatized me so much, and it was pretty detailed. And that's when I started waking up. But this COVID, I'm thinking about doing a satire thing on the flu. My son really wants me to do this. And I'm not going to go into too much details on it. It's just because I want to do a comedy thing because it's just so bad.
Right.
But they stopped tracking the flu. The CDC, for the first time ever, is not going to track the flu this year, because if you go look at what the weekly flu numbers are, usually they're like 900 a week. Now they were down to like 5 a week.
Well,
literally.
COVID is the cure
And
for
so-
the flu, so.
That's exactly right. COVID cured the flu. So these COVID numbers are, and how many people who just have the cold have
Now,
COVID?
real quick, I want to make sure that the listeners get this idea, and then I'll let you get back to being awesome there. You have to ask yourself, what's the motive of somebody? You have to ask that question. You do.
Mm-hmm.
So take me out of this discussion. The listeners, you listen to my show, so you know what I'm all about. But Sarah, let's talk about what Sarah's all about. This woman faithfully writes a blog, documents, puts out content all day, and no good deed goes unpunished, if I'm correct, Sarah. You are putting out this content, and you're doing it because you love your family, you love this country, and you know what is coming if we allow the global reset to happen. So sink this into your mind, Thrive Nation. Put this thought into your mind. What is more uncomfortable? Living in a concentration camp after the global reset, after the Great Reset, or sharing the truth? What's more uncomfortable? Pick a side today. Pick one. Choose one. Because not choosing by default is the Canadian internment camps. Sarah, do you agree with what I just said? And if not, please feel free to one-up me or tuck it in.
We don't have a choice. I've come to the conclusion, I don't care how many people call me a moron. I don't care how many people tell me that I'm being irresponsible and that I'm crazy. I'm not going to stop, because our country's on the line. My children's future, my neighbors' children's future, it's all on the line, and it's very serious. And these people behind it are very serious. Mm-hmm. And I think it's more serious than anybody is willing to talk about publicly at this point. And we'd have no choice. This is like a last stand kind of stuff. I will not stop fighting, because this is that serious. And people need to understand how serious it is.
I'm going to jump in and just be the positive voice here for a minute, Clay, because I feel like this stuff can get really heavy.
It
And
can.
I'm totally with you, Sarah, and I thank you for being an awesome patriot. But I believe that good triumphs over evil. I believe that light triumphs over darkness. And I believe that, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but
Yes.
against spiritual wickedness in heavenly places. And I believe that that God loves us, loves America. We are the nation under God, and that He will bring us through this. But when I think about people like yourself who are sharing what you're sharing, and maybe it's doing things to your reputation or whatever out there, I love Mark Twain's quote on this. He says, "In the beginning of a change, the patriot is a scarce man, and brave and hated and scorned. When his cause succeeds, the timid join him, for then it costs nothing to be a patriot. And I believe that right now we are at that place where people need to pick a side and decide if they are going to be a patriot or if they are going to be the ones who just sit on the sidelines until the battle has been won.
Yep.
So I applaud you, Sarah, for being a great patriot.
Absolutely. We all do. Thank you so much. And Sarah, thank you for being here tonight. I really do appreciate you. You're a great American.
Thank you. And before, I don't know if you're wrapping this up or not, but
Sure.
I have a little bit more time, but I want to tell people I have a show that I did where it was called
I'm sorry, it cut out. What was your show
a
called?
producer of a movie called Finding Courage. I did an interview with somebody that her name is Kay Rubachek, who did a movie. It was supposed to be on the big screen and it couldn't because of COVID. It was called Finding Courage. It was about a Chinese family that was persecuted by the Communist Party, and they put them in a concentration camp. And it was the story of this family, because the Falun Gong were persecuted and now they're persecuting the Uyghur Muslims. But it was how they triumphed over this situation. And it's a very uplifting show. But she came on to talk about, she interviewed a few dozen former and current Chinese party officials on what this environment is like. And it was so hard, hard for us in the West to get our mind wrapped around. They call them the Walking Dead because they leave their humanity behind to do what they need to do for the party, for the Chinese country, because it's not it's an anti-human thing that they do to people and how they oppress them. And it's a very eye-opening when you understand what they have to live through.
Where can we see that video?
You can go to my website at sarahwestall.com. It's on the front page and you can look at it, but it's really important. You can buy her movie and you can get her book. It's $20. You save 25% if you use my code. I think it's Sarah. I know it's on my website on the thing, but I think every high school student and college student need to see that. They need to understand what this is about.
Yep.
We have lost that in this country, what it means to have responsibility, to be on, what it means to be free. There's responsibility to that. And it's like being a parent versus a child. It's important.
Well, Sarah, I thank you for joining us, and I just want to blow your mind real quick. Footage just was released by Right Side Broadcasting Network showing Kamala Harris fist-bumping Senator Lindsey Graham today on the Senate floor.
For what?
Unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. It's really, you talk about how deep the corruption goes. What is that fist bump all about? As a general rule,
right.
I don't fist bump people that are trying to kill the country I love. Aaron, check this out. Look at this footage here. This is Lindsey Graham giving the old fist bump here to Kamala Harris right there. There they are. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Thank you for the fight you're putting out. Thank you so much for fighting for us, Sarah. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Andrew, are you ready for part 2 of today's show?
I am so ready for part 2 of today's show.
If you need some encouragement, you're going to love part 2. Here we
right.
go.
Encouragement. Yes.
3, 2, 1, boom! You are now entering the dojo of Mojo and the Thrive Time Show.
Thrive Time Show on the microphone. What is this? Top of the iTunes charts in the category of business. Drilling down on business topics like we are a dentist. Providing you with mentorship like you are an apprentice. And we go so fast that you might get motion sickness. Grab a pen and pad to the lab. Let's get in this. It's time to bear some fruit like some Florida oranges. 3, 2, 1. Here come the business ninjas.
Sonic boom.
James D. Cristofaro.
Yes, sir. I'm in the house
Before we
here.
get into the show, we're going to do
All right.
kind of a spelling bee. We're going to start off. How do you spell your name, sir?
James.
Got it. Last name, please.
DE, capital C, RISTO, F like Frank, ARO.
ARO, okay. So now that you've got your first question right, it's going to get increasingly more difficult.
Okay.
The second question is, have you seen the information I'm putting on the screen right now in front of you? Have you ever seen this before? Andrew, can you cue it up so he can see it? And I want to make sure you can see the documentation that I see. Is Andrew around?
Yeah, I can do it right here.
Did he get offended? Is he upset? Okay. Yeah. This document here, have you seen this? What I put on the screen, have you seen this before?
No.
Andrew, can you pull this up here on the screen so James can read this? I'm asking, let's make sure we get this idea. The only time that I would ever hire an attorney, Josh, that you'd ever hire an attorney, right, is when we need someone to break down their understanding of the law.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what I'm going to read this to you, James, and I'd like for you to break down what this means, okay?
Okay.
Having never seen it before, then we're going to test your legal knowledge here, okay? Okay. So the penalties, the subject is the penalties for entities that commit fraud within the United States elections. In 2015, Obama signed an executive order. In 2016, Obama signed, he extended the executive order. And in 2018, President Trump extended the extension of the executive order that says all assets of any individual or organization found to be tampering with the voting can be seized. So if we click on the link on the White House website, I'm going to have you read it out loud to us as I cue up my music. This music is, to me, it's like my prayer music.
Okay.
So as I'm queuing it up, you read it to us, please. And it's like a lullaby, because this could be the most exciting thing that I have seen in years. Or it could be a nothing burger, and it is you who shall determine
Me alone?
I put my hope in the
right.
Lord, so I'm already very excited. I know President
Yes.
Trump's going to win, but please read this to our listeners from the White House website, please.
By the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, open parens 50 U.S.C. 1701 et sequitur, close parens, open parens IEEPA.
Why don't you skip any of the parentheses stuff just so people can follow along? Keep going.
The National Emergencies Act, Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, and Section 301 of Title III United States Code. I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, find that the ability of persons located in whole or in substantial part outside the United States to interfere in or undermine public confidence in the United States elections, including through the unauthorized accessing of election and campaign infrastructure or the covert distribution of propaganda and distribution, constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. Although there has been no evidence of a foreign power altering the outcome or vote tabulation in any United States election, foreign powers have historically sought to exploit America's free and open political system. In recent years, the proliferation of digital devices and internet-based communications has created significant vulnerabilities and magnified the scope and intensity of the threat of foreign interference, as illustrated in the 2017 Intelligence Community Assessment. I hereby declare a national emergency to deal with this threat. Accordingly, I hereby order Section 1, A, not later than 45 days after the conclusion of a United States election,
Which would be like 35 days after now.
the Director of National Intelligence, in consultation with the heads of any other appropriate executive departments and agencies, shall conduct an assessment of any information indicating that a foreign government or any person acting as an agent of or on behalf of a foreign government has acted with the intent or purpose of interfering in that election. The assessment shall identify, to the maximum extent ascertainable, the nature of any foreign interference and any methods employed to execute it, the person involved, and the foreign government or governments that authorized, directed, sponsored, or supported it. The Director of National Intelligence shall deliver this assessment and appropriate supporting information to the President, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, the Secretary of Defense, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of Homeland Security. B. Within 45 days of receiving the assessment and information described in Section 1A of this order, the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security, in consultation with the heads of any other appropriate agencies, and as appropriate, state and local officials, shall deliver to the President, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, and the Secretary of Defense a report evaluating with respect to the United States election that is the subject of the assessment described in Section 1A. Sub 1. The extent to which any foreign interference that targeted election infrastructure materially affected the security or integrity of that infrastructure, the tabulation of votes, or the timely transmission of election results. And 2, if any foreign interference involved activities targeting the infrastructure of or pertaining to a political organization, campaign, or candidate, the extent to which such activities materially affected the security or integrity of that infrastructure, including by unauthorized access to, disclosure or threatened disclosure of, or alteration or falsification of information or data.
Here comes the good part.
The report shall identify any material issues of fact with respect to these matters that the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security are unable to evaluate or reach agreement on at the time the report is submitted. The report shall also include updates and recommendations, when appropriate, regarding remedial actions to be taken by the United States government other than the sanctions described in sections 2 and 3 of this order.
Here we go.
C. Heads of all relevant agencies shall transmit to the Director of National Intelligence any information relevant to the execution of the Director's duties pursuant to this order, as appropriate and consistent with applicable law.
Oh, this is good.
If relevant information emerges after the submission of the report mandated by Section 1A of this order, the Director, in consultation with the heads of any other appropriate agencies, shall amend the report as appropriate, and the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security shall amend the report required by Section 1B as appropriate.
Oh, yeah.
D. Nothing in this order shall prevent the head of any agency or any other appropriate official from tendering to the President at any time through an appropriate channel any analysis, information, assessment, or evaluation of foreign interference in the United States election.
Feel the flow.
If information indicating that foreign interference in a state, tribal, or local election within the United States has occurred is identified, it may be included as appropriate in the assessment mandated by Section 1A of this order, or in the report mandated by Section 1B of this order, or submitted to the President in an independent report. F. Not later than 30 days following the date of this order, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of Homeland Security, and the Director of National Intelligence shall develop a framework for the process that will be used to carry out their respective responsibilities pursuant to this order.
Now pause. What we're saying, just summary, the President's saying that if any foreign entity, correct me if I'm wrong, any foreign organization, entity interferes with our elections,
I would say it's even broader than that. It includes
local,
any person acting on behalf
tribal,
of that agency.
So if anybody interferes with our foreign entity or someone related to that, right, interferes, he's defining if any foreign thing interferes with our elections, certain things are going to happen, correct?
Yeah, or any person acting on behalf of that.
So I'm going to read this to you, and you tell me, Josh Wilson, not an attorney, what your thoughts are on this, okay?
Okay, I'm ready.
When we voted in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and our listeners voted anywhere out there, the machines that we used to vote were created by a Canadian company called Dominion, okay? They were used in 28 states. Mm-hmm. Step 2, the software used by Dominion was funded and founded by the communist Venezuelan dictator Chavez and the Maduro family. So when you voted, the software, Aaron, that tabulates your votes was created by communists.
That's crazy.
Then the votes were sent to Frankfurt, Germany, to be held on servers, where they were then tabulated in Barcelona, Spain. And the Dominion software included a feature that nobody knew about that said it has a feature to switch the votes.
Copy and paste.
So we raided the Frankfurt, Germany servers. This is a fact. And we found that they have the ability to switch votes. Fact. And so right now, when working with Mr. Roger Stone, fact, we have found right now, not speculation, fact, we have signed affidavits. Fact, not accusations. I'm talking about affidavits. That's where you sign and you say, I'm willing to go on a limb stating that what I'm telling you is a fact, and if I am in fact wrong, I am risking going to jail for perjury. We have found, this is real stuff, folks. This is real stuff. We have people that have signed an affidavit. James, what is an affidavit, please? What does an affidavit mean? When someone says, I sign this affidavit. How
It's
powerful
a
is that?
sworn statement under penalty of perjury.
Okay. So we have people who have signed affidavits who have sworn that they have seen 130,000 ballots arrive in Michigan in a Chrysler 300, in a van, and in a Ferrari in the middle of the night, and all of the votes were for Biden. Fact. We have facts that the votes could be switched, and they were switched due to what they call a glitch by a Venezuelan company. Fact. Now, that sounds to me like is Venezuela part of the United States?
No.
So, can you continue, please, reading right here where it talks about the penalties, Section 2A. This is what happens if we find out that you were interfering with our election per this incredible, glorious, sanctimonious executive order. Please read.
Section 2A. All property and interests in property that are in the United States that hereafter come within the United States or that hereafter come within the possession or control of any United States person of the following persons are blocked and may not be transferred, paid, exported, withdrawn, or otherwise dealt in any foreign person determined by the Secretary of the Treasury in consultation with the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of Homeland Security. Sub 1. To have directly or indirectly engaged in, sponsored, concealed, or otherwise been complicit in foreign interference in the United States election. Sub 2. To have materially assisted, sponsored, or provided financial, material, or technological support for, or goods or services to, or in support of, any activity described in subsection A1 I of
Quick
this
time
section.
out. What it's saying is it sounds like if you have aided anybody that is a foreign entity with interfering with our election, certain things may be happening to you. Certain things.
That's what it looks like.
And this document's from the White House. Does this look to be from the White House?
Yes.
Whitehouse.gov. As I read this, we're talking about the seizure of the assets of anybody that worked with a foreign entity to mess up our election system. Is that how you're reading this, James?
Yeah, that sounds pretty
Have you
accurate.
seen this document before?
No, this is the first time I've read it. I haven't read the whole thing.
Sometimes I
So
love
it's a
myself.
subject to
Sometimes
that,
I
but-
love myself. Sometimes I look at myself and I say, poor job in most areas, but you're a researcher. Good job. And I can tell you why the world's been freaking out and doing this, been researching this, and it looks to me, fact, based upon this document, which we'll make available for all of our listeners on today's show notes, that President Trump knew this would happen. And so he made a plan. And it looks as though the plan's going well. Right? I mean, right? I mean, does this not, James, is that not what this document would imply to you? Or what do you think? How do you process this? Just your first kind of glance at it. You're a skeptical, man. I get that. I respect that.
Yeah, I mean, wasn't this also a carryover from earlier administrations as well?
As I mentioned, I was telling people, in 2015, Obama signed this executive order. Fact. In 2016, he signed it because I don't think they thought President Trump would be in office. But now he is. And here we go. So what does this mean? All we know is it said 45 days from the time of the election. And we're, 10 days after the election now, 12 days after?
Something like
Yeah,
that.
2 weeks.
So I want everyone just to calm down, recognize that Jesus is king, and we're going to win this thing. But if you find evidence of fraud, I need you to email me to info@thrivetimeshow.com. Email evidence of actual fraud. Anybody who you know who has signed an affidavit, send me their information. Because we now have a 18-page document filled with cited examples of voter fraud, and it is glorious. And if you want to get that, folks, just email me to info@thrivetimeshow.com. But I mean, Josh, had you heard about this document?
Yes. Yeah, you shared it with me. Took a look at it.
Aaron, had you heard about this document?
Oh, yeah.
This
it
is an exciting
pretty
thing.
extensive.
Are you hearing about this on the news?
No.
No, you're not.
No,
gonna
in
hear
fact,
this.
if you look on the news or search Google for anything about the election, it is plenty of results about how there's absolutely no fraud whatsoever, which when they're all that certain of it, it's like, oh, that just makes it even more obvious.
Very excited about what's going to happen next. Now, we have to go because we have to interview the founder of Atari, so
Yes.
we're going to go do that. All right, Andrew, so here we are. We're going to be headed into the outro of today's show. We're going to end the show with a boom, and then we're going to play a new song that Charles and I have been working on, Young Knowledge and I. The song is called Pick a Side.
Yep.
It's young knowledge featuring myself, and hopefully we enjoy it because you want to hear it. We're going to play it for you in just a second,
right.
but we're not going to play it before we end the show with a boom. We got to end the show with a boom.
We've got to do it.
So here we go. 3, 2, 1, boom.
Boom.
If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. So just as I say, we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around. We aren't going to let any injunction turn us around.
Gotta pick a side, man, it's do or die. Trying to stay up in the middle, man, that's suicide. Be hot or be cold, what's it gonna be? Spoil me with loyalty, it's all I wanna see. If you ain't saying nothing, then you saying something. What you see is what you get, man, I ain't never frontin'. I see your problem, I'm lazy, cause I ain't never running. Opposition passing it off, cause they ain't never wanted. Come on, time to say goodbye, it is you and I.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die.
Time to pick a side, homie, do or die.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die. No mess, no backs for me. Both middle fingers up for Dr. G. I'm never gonna listen to his latest pitch or the scarf queen. His Dr. Brooks is up. I'm an American with the First Amendment and the Second Amendment to defend it. You want our guns? Well, come and take it. I hope you're good at dodging bullets and you're praying. The year 2020, the year of perfect vision. The time when you and I have to make a decision. Open up your minds like Hunter's laptop. But when you see corruption, this time it's gotta stop. Back the police, say no to the beast. No to the mask, take no vaccine. Back the police, say no to the beast. No to the mask, take no vaccine.
Time to say goodbye, it is you and I.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die.
Time to pick a side, homie, do or die.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die.
Come on. If you compromise, it'll multiply. Treat you like a doormat, treat you speak your mind. Ain't hard to find, you must be blind if you can't see the sign. I got a spine, I won't ever let them take what's mine. Time to unify, I'm talking you and I. If you ain't riding for the cause, better move aside. Sit back, watch me work, I'ma do it right. Time for you to pick a side, it's looking like a do or die. Time to say goodbye, it is you and I.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die.
Time to pick a side, homie, do or die.
When you compromise, it will multiply.
We ain't never scared to put it on the line.
It's time to pick a side, it's do or die.
Our country will never be a socialist country. We're not going to let it happen.
And that is another lyrical miracle on the Thrive Time Show.